I know it's Halloween, but we've got no ugly masks on. I was going to wear a Donald Trump mask, but then I was scared you might switch off. The 20th medium-term budget policy statement presented last week, one of the toughest yet. The Finance Minister, Pravin, Gordhan, had to fulfil the needs of a nation very hungry for jobs and growth, as well as trying to appease ratings agencies. And it was a very difficult act. So difficult, in fact, that the President nodded off. This is the MoneyMakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Tonight I'm joined by the Chief Executive of Nedbank, Mike Brown, to discuss how to grow the economy, how to do good business with all the political noise that's about. Of course, he's part of the Chief Executive grouping that has been working very hard with the Finance Minister and with Labour over the last 8 or 9 months to try and stave off the downgrades. They succeeded in June. Was the medium-term budget policy statement good enough to see that being staved off again in December? Was it good enough?
I think the Finance Minister did a really good job.
It was a remarkable job.
With a very difficult set of cards. If we're saying was it good enough, I think the first thing that was very definitely good enough is that it was presented by the current Finance Minister, which I think certainly if it wasn't, that would be an automatic downgrade.
Yeah.
And if you look underneath the budget, I mean, he's really got a very difficult set of circumstances. Growth everywhere is too low. It's too low everywhere in the world. It's too low here in South Africa, some globally and some because of our own issues. That means revenue is going to be down. And that means he's got to try and squeeze costs. And effectively what he's done is produced a budget that has slightly higher deficits than before.
That slightly higher deficit, not a problem?
I think
percentage points. I mean, it's percentage points.
No, I don't think that that's a problem, because really in the current circumstances, to get the deficit to come down faster would have probably had to be anti-growth. Mm-hmm. And he's got a real balancing act here, because people want deficits to come down, but they still want growth.
Now, growth is absolutely pivotal, because you don't get an increase in revenues without growth. And we grow at best. He actually upgraded the Reserve Bank's forecast, which 3 months ago was sitting at 0. Then the Sitja went to 0.4. He's going 0.5. Yeah. Dennis Dykes, your colleague, I think, is still sitting at 0.2 or thereabouts. It's arguable as to what it's going to be. Whatever it is, it's not good enough. The 1.7 projection next year, in the feeling right now, feels pretty ambitious.
Yeah, so I think that the current year growth rates, actually, we would have thought that the previous growth rates were overstated, and everybody's coming back to a number that we think is more reasonable now. I think if you look forward to next year, it does look like a stretch to get to 1.7. And the real issue for growth is that growth in our current environment is as a consequence of investment. And to get investment, you need confidence. And right now, we're short of confidence. And we've got to try and make sure that people are in a situation where outcomes are in line with their expectations, because that creates confidence when reality and expectation are equal.
Now, I mean, the confidence boost that we got with the appointment of Pravin Gordhan just after the 9th of December last year, then the pre-Davos, post-Davos and the subsequent meetings in which you've been intimately involved, should have been massive confidence boosters. Yet, the politics keeps undermining the gains that we make. It's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. We're not going backwards, but we're going forward a lot more slowly than we should.
I think that's right. There's an enormous amount of people who are doing, I think, the best work I've seen in 20 years in business, of business, government and Labour working together to try and figure out how do we get a more inclusive and growing economy. But at the same time, there's a soap opera playing out. And as I said to you before we came on air, in South Africa, once you've read the Sunday Times, you don't really need to switch on the soap opera on TV because it's playing out in front of us.
No, it most certainly is. And it's a devastating soap opera. And what it's killing is confidence. Not only maybe external confidence, which is quite scary, but internal confidence. We're losing confidence in ourselves to manage our own destiny.
Yeah, I think that's right. And certainly what this body of people is trying to do, and it's becoming increasingly more vocal, as you saw through things like the CEO's pledge, is to try and say that the centre can hold. And actually there should be reason for confidence.
I was chatting to Jacko Marie the other day, erstwhile Chief Executive of Standard Bank. I said, isn't it uncomfortable for you? Because he's about as much of a political animal as anybody who's never been a politician. I mean, he's quite shy of politics. And I said, isn't it awkward? And he agreed that it was awkward, but he said, we have no choice. Business has had to, actually for the first time, step forward and take a leadership role. And clearly you felt the same.
Yes, I think there are lots of things here. Certainly everybody has their own individual view as to what business should or shouldn't do, or how far forward or back people should step. But if we look at it from perhaps our organisations and my perspective, it's not our role to say who should lead what and who should be in charge of what, but it's very clearly our role to try and point out what's good for society, what we think is good for business and growth and therefore jobs, and what situation needs to be created in a country that is going to result in an outcome that is going to be growth friendly and therefore jobs friendly. And that's what you're trying to see. I think that's what you're seeing here is a lot more vocalism around the outcomes of the current environment not being satisfactory.
I mean, how comfortable are you playing part-time politics? How comfortable are your shareholders? You're sort of taking your eye off the Nedbank ball and focusing on the bigger picture.
So I don't think it's for a minute playing part-time politics, and actually our shareholders should be incredibly comfortable, because all we're really trying to do is make sure that as business we do everything we can to create the best South Africa possible.
Did you think twice before you put your name on the list of 81 CEOs who signed up to support Pravin Gordhan?
Absolutely not.
I mean, you didn't hesitate to say, is this my job? Is it my role to do this?
No, absolutely not.
I mean, and that is a strong vote of support. And I've spoken, of course, to Sipho Pachana in recent days, and he is leading the Save South Africa coalition. He wants South Africans to take to the streets this week on Thursday as the finance minister goes to court. It's an extraordinary show of public support against a system which many South Africans regard as fundamentally rotten. As far as business is concerned, you can't have a sustainable business in a rotten environment, surely.
As I said earlier, when you say, what do our shareholders think? I mean, clearly shareholders know that the only way for businesses to be successful over time is to operate inside a successful environment.
Your former chairman, Roel Khoza, warned about this, was it 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
That's right.
It was torn apart. It's a far calmer response to business's intervention this time.
Yeah, well, I think what you've seen is that was probably one of the first vocal responses. But since then, I think business has figured out that you can't actually stay in the background, because there's so much noise in the system that the actual good that business can do for society in terms of growing economies and providing jobs for people gets drowned out in the process. So business does need to step forward with its voice.
Do you find your job in 2017 going to be harder than the job in 2016? Because 2016 has been a pretty tough year. There are going to be higher taxes. There's going to be less disposable income. There's going to be less money to take out loans, repay mortgages, repay credit cards, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2017 will be a tough environment. It's not a surprise to us. So, our business is prepared to deal with that as an outcome. And, businesses are cyclical. So, yeah, it's going to be difficult, but we're ready for it.
It's been a long downward cycle. I mean, every indicator you look at over the last 5 years has been a gradual step downwards. What is going to be the catalyst to get the growth that you guys have been working on so studiously for the last 9 months?
So I think, first of all, we do need some help from the world, because growth globally is too low absolutely everywhere. But there's also some self-help here. And certainly from our point of view, as I said right in the beginning of the interview, if we think about the most important things, confidence, because we need investment. Growth doesn't happen without investment, and we need this confidence to get investment going into the economy. And then we also need some form of reforms. And if you have a look and say, well, what are those sorts of things? I mean, we'd quite simply say, actually, if you look at the policies of government as reflected currently, we just need to implement our current policies. We've actually got a fantastic set of policies set out in the National Development Plan. We just need to get off our proverbial backsides and implement what we've said in that plan.
But that's been one of the great weaknesses of the plan, it's had no champion, and theoretically the president and the presidency should have been the champions of this report, but somehow have been otherwise occupied or distracted.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a fantastic plan. Obviously for growth, what you need is appropriate, let's say, fiscal base, and that's why the rating agencies and everything are so important. And then in particular, if you sort of pulled out a couple of the real challenges that we face as a country, we've got a massive challenge in productivity and labour costs, which is making us globally uncompetitive. And if you're globally uncompetitive, you can't grow.
But in South Africa, with our very short-term view, it becomes politically unpalatable to challenge that.
Yeah, absolutely. But we are globally uncompetitive in many of our industries. And on the second front, if you look at many of the rules and regulations, and particularly here you look at some of the challenges facing our mining industry, we have a mining industry that's in decline. So those are really two obvious examples of where we could look for opportunities for growth.
I've chatted when the finance minister was in the US. I chatted to him, and he sounded frustrated that we hadn't had greater progress over the last months of this cooperative agreement. Jabu Mabuza, I saw him on a plane last week just after the medium-term budget policy statement. He looks like he's gone 9 rounds with Mike Tyson. People are tired, and people are, my sense is, getting a little bit frayed at the edges in terms of progress. When do we see tangible progress of all this work that's been done?
So I think we've already seen tangible progress. If you have a look at the streams of work that we were trying to do as a grouping, the first stream of work was around trying to prevent the ratings downgrade in June, and we managed to do that. So there's very definitely some tangible progress. We'll get to December and see if we've been able to do that again. But I do think we've probably done enough as a country to be able to get through December again.
I suspect you're right on that point, yeah.
Then the second thing that we sat back and looked at as a unit was to say, if you look at any of the research around where does economic growth come from and where does job creation come from in countries anywhere in the world, it comes from small and medium enterprises, not from big businesses like ours. We paid as chief executives to try and get more and more efficient every year, which isn't good for job creation. So as a consequence of that, the SME fund that Adrian Gore was fundamental in creating with Brian Joffe is up and running. That's got a board of directors. There's $1.5 billion of commitments from corporates into that. So I think by the time you get to the middle of next year, that's going to be paying away. So there's a very real outcome from that.
But there's no single silver bullet. If there was one thing that Mike Brown could do today to ignite the confidence, to ignite confidence, what is the one thing that you would do?
I think the key would be to first of all, from a South Africa Inc. point of view, set a tone that is more pro-business. It's not possible to be pro-growth and anti-business.
Do you still feel that the state is anti-business? With all of the work that you've been doing together with Treasury, and I appreciate that Treasury is not the state. Treasury is very much understand which side its bread is buttered, but the rest of the state's still fairly hostile.
No, well, I think that we polarized, so you get different views. I mean, certainly Treasury, as you say, I think understands that actually the only way that you can reduce the fiscal deficit is to collect more taxes, and the only way to collect more taxes is to have more businesses paying taxes.
And people paying taxes employed by those businesses.
For sure.
Mike Brown, thanks very much for coming in this evening. Mike Brown, my guest, he is Chief Executive at Nedbank. There'll be other ways to try and ignite some growth in our struggling economy, and we can stop the soap opera, as Mike Brown puts it, and focus on the hard news of the day. That's till next time. Bye-bye.